All right, it is May 6, 2022, and I want to talk about definitions of exercise. So let me start by doing my best here to share my screen and start with that one, share, and then I'm going to go here and go to this. I'm hoping this works. Anyways, I'll find out. You won't see this if it didn't work. So I'm starting off going back to something I've done a couple of entries on already, several, and we talked about, this is from Ken Hutchins' book, The Unified Theory of Exercise. That's not the name of the book, this is part of the book from Renaissance Exercise from his writings. And we talked about different aspects of this. And I want to focus today on the definition of exercise. And the idea of defining and the idea that not all activity is exercise. So I'm going to take Ken's definition and one other, and I'm going to have a few comments on each. So Ken Hutchins is the author of the Super Slow Exercise Manual. The cover you're seeing now is The Renaissance of Exercise. There's a volume 2 and numerous articles. If you go to SiriusExercise.com, you can see many of his articles. I highly recommend his work. Ken doesn't pull any punches. He tells it like it is. And one of the things that he's come up with is what he calls the first definition of exercise. And this is actually probably a decade or two ago. So I'm just going to read it out. Exercise is a process whereby the body performs work of a demanding nature in accordance with muscle and joint function in a clinically controlled environment within the constraints of safety, meaningfully loading the muscular structures to inroad their strength levels to stimulate a growth mechanism within minimum time. Okay, so there's a lot there. So I'm going to start where, first of all, work of a demanding nature, meaning the exercise must be difficult. Otherwise, if we're doing something we're already able to do, then there's no reason for the body to have any adaptation. So it has to be demanding. In accordance with muscle and joint function. So this has to do with your various muscles, various joints bend a certain way and straighten a certain way. And if you're doing something that doesn't conform to that, there are both safety aspects that come into play, and there are also aspects of where you're not fully challenging those muscles or isolating them or emphasizing them if not isolating. Clinically controlled environment, meaning in his view, the environment in which this should be done should be minimum of distractions, and it should be at a certain temperature, all those things. So there's another part in the previous slide that talked about the ideal exercise environment, and our 2 slides. So ideal environment here, and that's what he means by clinically controlled within the constraints of safety. So this is a big one. So, and you'll see this in the upcoming definition, is if you do exercise, it's providing you benefit while also providing wear and tear, or potentially injuring you acutely in the process, then in his view, that means that what you're doing is not proper exercise, or he would say shouldn't be called exercise at all. Meaningfully loading the muscular structures to erode their strength levels. So again, going back to a demanding nature, the muscles have to be loaded. In other words, you're lifting weight or you're working against force. That doesn't mean high forces, just the force that's provided by the load. The inroad, which is another word for weakening. Inroading your strength levels means you're weakening the muscles to stimulate a growth mechanism within minimum time. In other words, it should be done with no additional time needed in order to make it as efficient as possible, again with less wear and tear. The one thing that I think about with this one is the growth mechanism. I would prefer an adaptation mechanism because muscular growth is only, in my opinion, one of many effects of proper exercise. And of course, you could say if you're stimulating that mechanism, all the other ones follow. But just my 2 cents on that. Now, Ken Hutchins, who gives credit in his preface to, Doug McGuff, in his book Body by Science, gives credit to Ken Hutchins, and this is also, Doug McGuff and John Little, in a lot of what comes into this book called Body by Science. And in this book, they refer to a different definition, although you'll notice there's a lot of similarities, although it's maybe not as specific or laser amount. So exercise, a specific activity that stimulates a positive physiological adaptation. So that's what I like better than just a growth mechanism. Stimulates a positive physiological adaptation that serves to enhance fitness and health instead of just growth. Now, fitness and health, those also need to be defined, but the other part is does not undermine the latter in the process of enhancing the former. So in other words, if it creates a positive physiological adaptation, and it tends to undermine fitness and health, then that's not good. And we see that a lot with elite athletes who, in their pursuit of ultimate performance, actually wind up doing harm to themselves. So the point here being with both is the need to define in the first place so that you can get away with just this idea that any old activity, gardening, whatever it is exercise. I think you can call those activities, you can call them in many cases recreational activities, and they may stimulate positive physiological adaptations, but they don't necessarily enhance fitness and health, and it all depends on how much you do. So it's not just a matter of what you do, but how much of it you do. So the minimum time. Now, others, and just to give credit, I'm looking for in the future, if I can find it, Brian Johnson has critiqued. And Brian Johnson, this is one of his books. He's written many books on exercise. Brian D. Johnson, Andrew Short, this one's called Zone Reps. And I also recommend Brian's writing, and he has critiqued Ken's definition of exercise. And I'm looking for that critique so that I can address it and see which parts I agree or don't agree with. And I've asked somebody out there to see if I can find it and address it in the future. But the main thing here is to not just think of anything as exercise. You know, oh, I should play tennis, that's good exercise. I should play basketball, that's good exercise. The fact is that those are recreational activities. Now, I already addressed that in recreation versus exercise. And some of those things do have benefits, both psychologically and building the character in some cases in team sports and things like that. But they do tend to have much higher injury potential and much lower efficacy in terms of simply conditioning because they happen as a side effect as opposed to the specific, the positive physiological adaptations, whatever they might be, happen as a side effect rather than as a result of doing that particular activity. I'm not telling people not to do them, I'm just telling people to make the definition. Anyways, that's it for now.